Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming to another Albright lecture this Thursday afternoon. Just a couple of announcements before we get started. First of all, we are live streaming tonight, so nobody say anything weird during the lecture.
I guess I have to leave.
For those of you at home, that was Steve's joke. A couple of announcements about upcoming events. Next Thursday, which is March 2nd, our Gittin professor, Gary Knoppers, will be speaking. The title of his lecture is There Are No Houses Being Rebuilt, Ezra and Nehemiah and the Archaeology of Early Second Temple Jerusalem. The following week, March 9th, our Glassman Holland Research Fellow, Felix Huffelmeyer, will be speaking on a topic entitled, It is Better to be Vaguely Right Than Exactly Wrong, Radiocarbon Dating and Middle Bronze Age Chronologies in the Eastern Mediterranean. And another event in March, this is a special event, a joint lecture with the Tantour Institute. It'll be here at the Albright on 16th of March, which is also a Thursday. The time will be later than usual to accommodate our friends from Tantour. That will be at 7 p.m. Please watch your email for further updates on that. The lecture will be by Czech Egyptologist Yuri Janak. He will be talking about the Wooden Book of the Dead and the Mummification Manual, two exceptional finds of the Czech Egyptological mission to Abu Sir. Without further ado, I will invite Gittin professor Gary Knoppers to introduce the speaker.
So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this afternoon, Professor Stephen Ortiz, the current Ernest Frerichs Annual Professor here at the Albright Institute. The title of his lecture is The Tel Gezer Excavations, the Transformation of a Border City in the Late Bronze and Iron Ages. Steve is the director of the Tandy Institute of Archaeology at Southwestern Baptist Seminary, at which he's also a professor of archaeology and biblical backgrounds. Word of background, Steve was instrumental in founding this institute. It now has 40 master's and PhD students enrolled. Steve received his BA in anthropology and sociology from California State University, Los Angeles, an MA in Near Eastern Archaeology from the University of Arizona, an MA in Bible History from Jerusalem University College, and a doctorate from the University of Arizona, under which he studied it with William Deaver. Steve has over 30 years of archaeological experience in Israel. He's been a senior staff member at Tel Zeta, Tel Ekron, Ketef Hinnom, Tel El Hama, and Lachish. He is the principal investigator and co-director, along with Sam Wolf, who's here, and Cy Gittin, who's here, of the Tel Gezer Excavation Project, and is one of the directors of the Ilan Balak project in Kazakhstan. He is co-author with Cy Gittin of the forthcoming report in the Tel Mikne Ekron series, dealing with the Iron Age II late Philistine temple complex. And this is in line with Steve's research, which focuses on the archaeology of the age of David and Solomon, the Iron Age I and Iron II transition, and the border relations between Judah and Philistia. Steve has served on a number of different boards, including the ASOR board, and I'm not going to read the whole list. You probably want to get on to Steve's lecture, so let me extend a warm welcome to Steve Ortiz.
Thank you all for attending. I know we all come here for Hisham's food, and we just have to throw a lecture together so we can participate with his cooking here. My co-director, Sam Wolf, has already been introduced, but Sam and I have, if you have any disagreements with this lecture, go to Sam. Anything you agree with, you can talk to me. Tel Gezer, most of us are familiar with the site. It's an important site in the northern Shrei, located one of the most important crossroads, the ancient Via Maris. It's mentioned in several historical texts, Egyptian texts, Assyrian texts, and as you can see here, just some view of the Arlan Valley has excellent resources. It's a 33-acre site, and what's important is pointing out the topography. You have the western hill and the eastern hill, and a saddle. Now, when you visit the site today, you really don't feel the saddle, but in antiquity, there was a cut here, and you're going to see this is why where some of the fortifications were placed. A major spring to the southeast in the wadi just to the south is, you can dig wells there. There are several even wells today. And this spring was up until recently one of the modern sources for Ramle, city about 5 miles away. Gezer has been extensively excavated. McAllister from 1902 to 1909, pretty much excavated about 40 to 60% of the site. In the 60s and 70s, he had Hebrew Union College have 10 years of excavations in 2 phases. There is some smaller excavations rolled at an EB site in 1934. My co-director Sam is currently working on these excavations. There's also several tombs around the site. Raymond Weil excavated some tombs. But these are the 2 major excavations, McAllister and HEC, until Sam and I came along. Now, the McAllister excavations are unique in how they've excavated the site. And so here's one of the problems or obstacles we have to encounter. They dug in 10-meter trenches. In fact, it's a big debate within archaeology, and Sam co-sponsored an event here at the Albright Institute on McAllister, whether he was a villain or visionary. And several archaeologists working in the region who have had to encounter McAllister participated in this symposium here at the Albright. Where McAllister found 7 or 8 strata in 1960 and 70 when the HEC excavations came. They found 26 strata. This was a tent excavation camp, and here you can see their main areas. They've opened up 10 fields. And naturally, when I've spoken to Bill Deaver, he said, look, we've done everything. We've pretty much answered all the questions at Gezer. Steve, why are you going back? And needless to say, not all the questions were answered. And so Sam and I, in 2006, started this joint project. It actually started around 2003 when we were looking for sites. We both excavated Iron Age sites, and we're looking for a major site. And I have to blame Cy Gittin, because he's the one who suggested that I should come back to Gezer. Because unlike Deaver, he knew there were still a lot of questions to be answered. I have to also acknowledge 2 auxiliary projects. There's the Gezer survey. This is started by a colleague of mine in 2007, Eric Mitchell. Their goal is to excavate a kilometer around the site. This is mostly a landscape project, excavating tombs, terraces, etc. And another, here's where they found a trough boundary inscription. And then another site by a sister seminary, New Orleans Baptist Seminary, and the National Parks Authority, Svikatsuk and Dan Warner, to excavate the water system. This project started as a National Parks project, is to haul out the dirt from the water system and make it a tourist attraction. It's now expanded into excavating the Middle Bronze Age. So here you can see an area of the ramparts. They've also are removing McAllister's dumps, adding their dump, filling up the excavations of HEC, and the plan to enter Gezer through the Middle Bronze Age gate. So the National Parks has a whole new system where tourists will be able to walk up through the gate, go to the water system, see the excavation results there, and then hopefully come back to our excavation area, but I'm not sure if they're accounting for that. Now, Sam and I naturally have already hinted at, I'm sorry, this pointer is pretty sensitive. Some of the issues we're interested in, and these are some of the current chronological issues that are going on in Iron Age archaeology: state formation processes, the border between Judah and Philistia, Iron Age ceramic chronology, issues of urbanization. And so you can see why we went to a major biblical site, a major Iron Age site, to address some of these questions. And the big question is, where do we dig? After several surveys, walking the site, looking at the HEC reports, we came to what we thought was a primary area right between just west of the Iron Age gate. Here you can see the overview where we planned our new excavations. And part of the goal was to unite previous strata. You have the Field 3, Hebrew Union College excavations, and Field 7. And we knew from Gezer 3, Volume 3 of Site Gittin, that there was a nice ceramic sequence of the Iron Age. And so naturally, we wanted to at least try to address that, and we knew that this was a prime site. And so we kind of also wanted to unite both areas. So you can see our two fields, Field E and Field West. We weren't, E just stands for East and W stands for West. So Sam and I aren't very clever in our naming of our fields here, but that's a secret there. Here you can see an overview. Field E is designed to get this large urban exposure. The gate is just off the slide here to the east. And then you can see our Field West is our sondage. This is our attempt to get a cross picture of the occupation layers here on the Western Hill. And Hellenistic has already been excavated, but that's at surface level from the Iron Age 2 all the way to our Middle Bronze Age. Besides McAllister, we had several problems or issues. Here you can see McAllister's field. This is an Iron Age wall. And what McAllister did is he basically just dug through the walls, removing all the surfaces. So we'd have Iron Age occupation here and Hellenistic occupation below our Iron Age. But after digging at Gezer, you can quickly see the McAllister fields. And it's funny, when Deaver comes out to visit the site, he recognizes them instantly looking at our bulks, the sites there. Speaking of Deaver, we also have some of his mess. In 1984, 1990, he came and dug several small probes in our area. And so every square supervisor has the privilege of having a locus named Gezer's Trench or Deaver's Trench or pit. And you can see several of the pits that have started our excavations. We also have spent a couple of years excavating HEC archaeology dump. Here's our Iron Age fortification system, and their dump just covers the fortification system along with the glacis. So if they just added another 10 meters to their dump line, they would have saved us 2 years. But we also actually removed a belt from the 1970s. So we're able to date this to one of the Gezer staff members. There's also a lot of post-archaeological activity here. We also have a bulldozer cut here that we have to deal with, and there's just been a lot of activity as various entities have prepared the site for tourists and other activities here at the site. Nevertheless, after 9 seasons, Sam and I have a good grasp. We have 13 strata, and you can see just from this one picture, we have several occupation layers. And so hopefully today I'll kind of give you an overview of these occupation layers. Naturally, one of our goals is the fortification system. And like everywhere on Gezer, when you dig the fortification system, you hit the MB glacis. And sure enough, that also happened in our area here. And not so much, we haven't changed any pictures from what HEC has exposed. Except in this area, there's a uniqueness. It's still the same 45-degree angle. Ours is probably 10 meters versus there are 7 meters. But this is probably due to the location on the Western Hill and part of going to the saddle. But we also, our glacis also uses, you still have the layered system like Gezer's famous for, but ours is layered with stone on top. And so this is probably just another unique method just for the location of where it sits on the Western Hill, as opposed to the excavations of Field 6. Now, what's important to us is in the midst of this sondage, we have a small window of this late Bronze Age building. And as you can see, we haven't fully excavated it. It's just part, basically we found it as we were cleaning the Iron Age wall system. And in this next slide, you can see this tight stratigraphy. Here's our wall system. The glacis that went over this. In the process of excavating the glacis, we found a small, at least meter strip of late Bronze Age destruction. Putting the pieces together, here's a basic plan, about 10 by 15 meter building. Naturally, when we first found this large pillar base, we were thinking, boy, this has to be a temple. It's right here in the saddle. We thought of the Lachish Phos temples in the late Bronze Age, where their temples are built outside the city. And so, naturally, we thought we had this nice temple, but unfortunately, it's probably one of these patrician houses, the late Bronze Age. Here I show you several of these Canaanite courtyard houses, but also one from nearby Tel Safi. I can also show you one from Timnah, but these are these typical late Bronze Age patrician houses. Nevertheless, we found a massive destruction layer, a mud brick wall, a vat, a roof roller, or perhaps another type of use for a basin. And then our date is naturally pottery that dates to the 14th century, and this scarab of Amenhotep III, and naturally our Cypriot and Mycenaean pottery. We have also some interesting finds. We have this Reshef cylinder seal, which is unique. You have the deity, or normally you'd have the pharaoh fighting his villains or his enemies, and here you see this deity fighting, vanquishing the enemies. These types of reliefs are normally found on wall reliefs, and usually most cylinder seal scarabs have more images of worship, things going on in the temple, prayer, etc. But here we have somewhat of a battle scene. And what's important to point out is this building has been eroded away. It sits on the slope here. Here you can see a remnant of the Iron Age glacis, the Iron Age wall built directly on top of this building. And with this topography, granted we have, a couple thousand years of erosion on the south side of the slope, but even when we account for the Middle Bronze Age glacis, the extent of the Late Bronze Age, and in this photo, it's right here under the glacis. As we excavated the glacis, we found the Late Bronze Age. We have this one Late Bronze Age jar that came from this one probe here. You can see the Late Bronze Age is at the edge of the site, or the tell. So even a view of it based on the slope, based on the topography, we've postulated this before, that there's probably no evidence of a Late Bronze Age city wall at this point. We've already shown the evidence to Deaver, and I think he's finally accepted that, at least in our area, Gezer does not have a Late Bronze Age city wall. Now, I won't go into details here, but recent research in the Late Bronze Age, the outer wall, does Gezer have an Egyptian governor's residence, Gezer and the Amarna tablets, role of Gezer in LB social political organization, et cetera, et cetera. All I can say is on 2 meters of a building, we're not going to be able to change the history of the Late Bronze Age. But just to know that Gezer is a major part of what's going on, a lot of Amarna studies are naturally looking at Gezer. We have a couple of governors mentioned in the tablets. We have several tablets. Gezer is prominent in the political activity going on during the 14th century. Several scholars naturally have addressed the role of Gezer, and the debate is how big was Gezer, or how influential was Gezer. 2 studies that have come out, one by Vita that looks at the corpus itself, the content of the inscriptions and the epigraphy, And he postulates that there is one scribe that wrote the Gezer corpus. There is a tablet from Megiddo, and a study, petrographic study, has postulated that the tablet comes from the Gezer region. The authors of this study proposed that it's a Gezer scribe that traveled to Megiddo and wrote this Gilgamesh epic. Naturally, I like their conclusions. I like to say that Gezer was a center of activity in the southern Levant here. And because I'm sitting before Matt Adams here at Megiddo, I'd like to show that Gezer is an important site for Megiddo in the late Bronze Age, just as it is in the modern archaeological period. So we can see that Gezer continues to influence Megiddo, and I'm glad to see some of the staff members have acknowledged that in print. Whoever this Gezer scribe is, if it's a school, if it's under the auspices of the governor of Gezer, here I'll just show you several articles trying to address the role of Gezer. We do know that it played some important role. And because of that, everybody is looking for the Egyptian residency at Gezer. Here's some various proposals and their critiques. Basically, there's two locations, one in the center and somewhere on the Acropolis. And here you see the two, the Canaanite castle or McAllister's brick building. But because the site was not properly excavated, all we can do is guess. And what scholars are doing, they're just looking at McAllister's plans and kind of guessing where a nice residence would be. And so they take the plan of Aphek and try to place it on Gezer. Your guess is as good as anybody's of where this site would be located. Just in summary, pulling all these small little pieces together, based on the HUC excavations on the southern part of the Western Hill, they do have domestic architecture of the late Bronze Age. And naturally, we have the LB IIB tomb located here. We have the Palace 14120 on the Acropolis, which is a major building complex in the late Bronze Age. And then wherever you want to put McAllister's buildings, you can guess which one belongs to what period. And then now we have to add our little Tandy patrician house. Most of these date to the 14th century. There are some later periods. And then naturally the question of the outer wall. At least in our area, we have to propose that it's not possible. One of the questions naturally is, well, we have Merneptah. During the 5th year of his reign, we have the famous Merneptah stela. And although everybody references Israel mentioned the stela, everybody forgets that Gezer was another major city that he mentioned. So much so that another inscription at Amarna, he calls himself Merneptah when he wants to brag about his campaign, the subduer of Gezer. And so at least according to Merneptah, Gezer was an important city, and naturally we should find Merneptah's city. Now I'll show you in our 14th century, we have no evidence of 13th century. HUC in their fields 1, 2, and 6, they have evidence of the 13th century or a city for Merneptah to conquer. And so what I'm proposing is, if there is a city of Merneptah, it's probably confined to the Western Hill. And so you can see whenever we've opened up modern excavations, we find evidence for Merneptah. But right here, down off the slope of the Western Hill, we have the 14th century and then no 13th century for the late Bronze Age. So possibly if we excavate field 7, we can see the extent of it, but it's probably just confined here. So after the Amarna period, the city contracts in size, probably just occupies the Western Hill based on the excavations of HUC. However we pull this evidence together, we do know that Gezer was an important city during the Amarna period. and everyone can draw their graphs and plans and images in terms of the political dynamics. On top of our late Bronze Age, 14th century occupation, we have an Iron Age 1 wall. Now this is in Field W. We have the city wall line that comes all the way from the six-chambered gate, the casemate wall line across this area. This was in our sondage, so we removed the Iron Age city wall, and what we found was an Iron Age 1 city wall. We weren't expecting this in other fields and other sondages of the HUC. They have not found an Iron Age 1 city wall, but we have a major city wall. Naturally, at the end of the season, you want to publicize your dig and hope that Fox News or CNN will pick it up and fundraisers will see it. So there's a biblical text that David chased the Philistines all the way to Gezer, from Geba to Gezer. And we said this is why he stopped at Gezer, because he hit a fortified city wall in the Iron Age 1. This was picked up by Christianity Today, and it became one of the top 10 finds of that year. Everybody came up to us and asked, what did you find at Gezer? We'd say, oh, it was a wall. You know? And so they were quite impressed that Sam and I were able to get the news media to name this wall as one of the top 10 sites. But for those who are familiar with archaeology, we know that there aren't many fortified Iron Age 1 cities. And so this is one of the major city walls that was found. It goes up the western hill. Here's where Marcella is brushing. On this surface here, up to the surface is 10 meters away. There's like 1.5 meters. So you can see it's a steep slope here as the city built up some type of terrace structure. And what we found is, looking at the line of our city wall, in field 10 of the HEC excavations, they have some wall lines. If you notice, our Iron Age 1 wall line does not line up with their wall line. And if we look at their wall line, it probably matches up with our late Bronze Age. And so while I said that we did not find the outer wall, it is possible that there is a late Bronze Age wall. This is cut by the field 10, and you can see stratigraphically it's below our Iron Age 1 wall and our Iron Age 2 wall. And so this season is our last season. We hope to at least go back into their field 10 and see if perhaps one of the walls that they found in field 10 or field 2 might actually be a late Bronze Age exterior wall, or else we have another building. Now, in our Iron Age 1, post 14th century, all the way to the 10th century, we have two major strata. And the strata, these are two subphases. You know, I'm saying two and everybody's counting three plans here. But these two major strata all use the same city wall. This was one structure. Last season, we found our strata 11. It consists of a major building, unit A. These are large, half-meter large stones, semi-hewn. Destruction debris, several stones fallen over in this building, and then several auxiliary units, a courtyard, unit B, unit C, probably a courtyard or auxiliary building. And along the city wall, several what we're calling storage units. And here's just a close-up of the plan here. What's unique is these storage units continue for all three phases, or our two strata and our two subphases of the Iron Age 1. And they're built up against the city wall. Perhaps this is an earlier conceptually type of the casemate wall system where you have storage units built along the city wall. Because throughout these phases, these storage units remain the same. And then whenever the city is destroyed, we have new units here. One of the unique features of this unit A, this building A, is a lamp and bowl deposit. These are common at Gezer. McAllister found them in the late Bronze Iron Age 1 periods. But ours is unique. You can see the lamp and bowl deposit right here, along with the chalice and a lamp, is that the bowls were unfired. So we had to cut it out and take it to our conservatory, but it was like with Play-Doh. If you touch the bowl, it would just break off. It was sort of like mud pies that were made. We had a fired lamp in between, and this is the best our conservator could do. What you can see, this basically mud pie that she just had to consolidate, and it kind of became a deformed bowl right here. McAllister also found one of these unfired bowls with a clay deposit. So it's a unique feature at Gezer, although these are found out throughout the southern Levant in late Bronze and Iron Age. And naturally, with this level, our stratum 11 and 10, we have the Philistine bichrome pottery. No monochrome at this level, so we're tentatively dating mid-12th century. This building is destroyed, goes out of use. Unit A and C no longer exist. Unit A southern wall is reused in another pillared building, or building A here, where Unit A was becomes a street, and then the courtyard becomes 2 units, and then we have this unique installation. It looks like a typical bin, a cobbled bin, but you can see later on, we still retain the same storage units along the wall system, but things have changed. In Stratum 10A, the circular insulation goes out of use, but it becomes an important room. And so now we have a separate room D where the circular insulation was. We still keep the pillared room. Room B, or Unit B, gets an entrance. Unfortunately, it's right here in the bulk, so you can't see it. And the 5 storage units are retained. This neostratum, I know this is the mumbo jumbo stratigraphically, but here you can see our stratum 11. The wall is reused. There's a second course laid on it. This is our stratum 10B surface, give or take. And this is where our stone insulation was located. And then a wall system built on top of it just to put that stone insulation out of use. And you can see the entrance here. I can just show you a better view of an aerial view. Here you can see these large stones, putting the stone insulation bin out of use, creating a new Unit D, and now you have a second entrance to whatever this room was, or the importance of this room, and then this pillared room here, this building. Same 5 units built up against the wall, and this stratum was destroyed sometime in the mid-10th century. Everywhere we've looked, and in all the rooms, we have destruction, debris, and just a sample of our, this is a mixed slide that has our stratum 11 and our stratum 10 pottery, but it's our typical Iron Age 1, Iron Age 2, 10th century forms. We do have a storage jar with a thumb impression. Boy, this is still in my thunder here. One of the interesting finds in this destruction are, well, it's not interesting to everybody who knows. These are just common stoppers, mushroom-shaped stoppers, clay shoved in the top of a store jar, and they just form a mushroom as they seal it. Naturally, my colleague was reading an article that some of these stoppers will have a seal on it, and so Sam yanked these out of our storage, brought them to his office, and sure enough, he found one on one of these stoppers. And these are ubiquitous on archaeological finds. We just kind of collect them, MC them, and hope some graduate student will be willing to publish these. There was an article by Stefan Munger, who's talking about the 21st Dynasty, Siamon seals found throughout the coastal area. He postulates a campaign or a resurgence of the 21st Dynasty of Siamon coming up the coast. And now at Gezer, we have a destruction with the Siamon seal in that destruction. Now, for the biblicist here in the audience and elsewhere, based on historical reckoning, there's the biblical text in 1 Kings 9 that mentions Gezer was given to Solomon by Pharaoh. And so everybody wants to know who is the Pharaoh that conquered Gezer and gave it to Solomon as a dowry and married his daughter off. There's an article by an Israeli, like in the 60s, who postulated that Siaman, based on Egyptian chronology, is the likely candidate. And now that you have Stefan Munker postulating that he was somewhat active, naturally we've tied in this Siaman with the one who gave Gezer to Solomon. Now, our seal fits anywhere in the 21st dynasty. It does not have Siaman's name on it. It just looks like a iconography that Siaman would use. And so that's the best we can do. Everybody wants to come and see the Siaman destruction at Gezer. But what we do have is somehow this Stratum 10, this building that we excavated, this pillar building, has unique finds. We have a miniature rattle, a six-toed figurine, a phallic object. This has to be an import from Megiddo, and the naturally spearheads, and the unique Siaman stoppers here. We don't have taboons, just store jars. This is, I hate to say this is a cultic site, hence I just put pillared room, but it's a different use of these buildings than a domestic space. We do know how houses looked during the Iron Age 1, thanks to our colleague Sondor, who've collated all the Canaanite courthouses. These structures do not look like the Canaanite courthouses. We do have two from Gezer. HEC excavated two of these central courtyard houses up on the Acropolis. So the builders at Gezer do know how to build a courtyard house in the Iron Age 1 period. Unfortunately, whatever the structure is, does not look like a courthouse. We have public buildings, some entrance from the west that's in our bulk into these two buildings, and this unique pillared hallway building with the niche that something was going on with unique, weird objects. This structure was destroyed, and then we have a brand new redesign of the city, of the complex here, new fortification system, our Stratum 8 that we're dating to the last half of the 10th century. We do have a Stratum 9. This is an ephemeral building between these two phases. So after this destruction, we have one small domestic house with just a cobble surface and a taboon. And then after that, we have a shift in the city of Gezer, or its urbanization here. This is where we have our six-chambered gate built, the casemate wall system, and a new, what we're calling a city design. Here you can see our fortifications. The east is at the bottom. Casemate wall. We initially thought it was destroyed because you can see these 5 rooms or these 5 chambers we thought were earlier structures of a destroyed casemate system. Now that we've excavated it, we realize this is actually Iron Age 1. It doesn't have anything to do with the casemate. It's off on a different line, and it kind of goes down the slope here. The casemate ends right here, and then we have a single wall line that continues. Later on, we postulate another rebuilding here in the 9th century because the wall is floating in the 10th century. And perhaps this green line here represents his 9th century reconstruction, but we do have evidence of an 8th century wall being built on top of here. So at this point, all we can say is we have the line of the Iron Age from the casemate all the way to the 8th century destruction by the Assyrians. At this point, again, based on the topography and no evidence, we think that the fortifications had a casemate wall system just for about 20 meters on each side of the gate. Once it went up the slope, they no longer needed the double casemate system, and it just became a fortification line once it reached the point up on the western hill. In Deaver in field 1 and field 2, as we continue west, did not find the casemate line. But because it sat on the edge of the hill, naturally postulated that it eroded away and fell off the hill. So we just had the interior line of the casemate. But right now, based on our one single wall line system, it's more likely, and Herzog proposed this earlier, that the casemates were just served as a more monumental function, as a monumental gate system with the casemates, and then in other parts, we just have a single wall system. But we do have a series of fortifications, and here you can see that the 10th century builders, or Stratum 8, were well aware of the Iron Age 1 wall system, and they incorporated it. In fact, in our NEH article, we talked about this being a subsystem of our Iron Age 2 casemate wall system. And then, like anytime you publish, a year or 2 years later, you excavate and you realize we were wrong. But you can see why it looks like one system. And that's because the Iron Age 2 were well aware of this wall system, and they just incorporated it into their wall system. Here you can see they built like a small tower on top of it and another auxiliary tower next to it. And we already removed the wall line to go down here. This wall system also had a glacis, and you can see an Iron Age glacis on top of our Middle Bronze Age glacis that we've excavated here. Several seasons of excavations in Field East. We've opened up our Stratum 8, our 10th century. Naturally, Field 3 of the HEC excavations, the city gate. And what we have here is what we've always called a Bit Helani type structure, but I'm just calling it a central hall administrative building, a pillared structure, and an open area here. This purple building is actually a later 9th century building. Our casemate wall line. And in Field West in the Sondage, we also have 10th century remains, but it's all being gutted out by McAllister. So all we can do is give you a city plan, and actually we have one cobble surface right here when we remove this bulk. So McAllister did leave us a little place here. But more importantly is this large Bit Helani type building, 19 by 12 meters. It's a large administrative building built next to the gate. Deaver did a 1984 probe in this building, and he postulated a palace 10,000. For those familiar with the Gezer history and excavations, this is part of Deaver's palace 10,000. But it's one of these typical Iron Age 2 palaces. Naturally, we all look to Megiddo, but these have recently been analyzed. We realize that a Bit Helani is a northern term. We really shouldn't be calling these Bit Helanis. So Gunnar and Ann call it a tetrapartite residence, central tetrapartite residence. Ilan and Annabelle call it a lateral axis podium, which is nicer because lap is an easier name to remember when you're teaching students. So naturally, Sam and ours have components of each of these, but basically it's these central corridor palaces with buildings built around it. And naturally, we're trying to avoid giving it a new name. So right now, we're just calling it these central administrative buildings with the central corridor. Ours is well built. We have ashlars found in the corners of the building, and evidence of destruction, but no destruction. We've removed the destruction. Stones collapse on these rooms. We look at the rooms, they're cleared. We have nice plaster surfaces. Nothing on the plaster surfaces. This is room 1. That's pretty much all we have, except for an ivory lid. This is a beautiful lid. It's found in pieces. It's been restored in our conservator. This is the typical game of Zenith from Egypt. We have these game boards from Nkomi. I saw one in the recent Egyptian exhibit, and the Israel Museum. And we have a nice one. In room 2, we have a bronze bracelet, a rattle, and at least we have their last meal because there's one pottery vessel, a cooking pot that was found in this room. And we know what the last meal was. It was a bovine with an antler. When we move down to the courtyard, the same experience. We have massive boulders. This is our ashlar wall that is collapsed, pushed over. Destruction. All these rooms were filled with this destruction. We kept telling students, look, this means that you're the first one that's exposed to this destruction. Once you remove all these stones, you're going to find all this smashed pottery. We lied to our students because all we found was nice plaster floors. We did have 3 taboons in the central courtyard. And like the 2 rooms, because of sifting, we find small objects, jewelry, something that people would have left when they cleaned out this building and they fled or they hid it out, and 2 figurines. This doesn't go together, this horn, but the field archaeologists went to UT Austin, so that's their symbol, the longhorn. So he created a longhorn based on 2 figurines. So I keep showing it because I'm from Texas, and Texas has a lot of money to give to archaeologists. So that will be on our T-shirt. Again, in the 2016 season, this past summer, we just took down some bulks to expose the room, and same thing, we found plaster surfaces, and as always, one little piece. Originally thought this was a figurine, but it's you can see it was attached to something, either a stand or a 3-dimensional plaque, but we don't have her head, so apparently it fell off, and like everything, it was just abandoned. So just like 5 or 6 objects. Throughout our Stratum 8, we do have, everybody has to have their one black juglet to date the 10th century. But our lapidou, our late Philistine decorated ware, the Ashdod ware, is the earlier burnished type of red slipped ware. Red slip pottery and typical 10th century cooking pots. But it appears that they were aware of whoever destroyed this Stratum 8. At least for the administrative building, this was cleared out. Other 10th century occupation was cleared up by McAllister. We do have one pillared structure with some finds in it, and so this is what we'll be able to restore. But this is our major 10th century. One of the unique issues or stratigraphic issues here is I keep mentioning that going up the western hill, we have this terrace-type structure. Here you can see our administrative building, the 2 rooms here, and then just 5 meters to the east, we have this other pillared building, and that's about 1 meter high. You can still see our 9th century, I'm going to talk about in a second here. And then when we get to Field W, already 2-3 meters are cobbled buildings here. So we're assuming a street that will be coming down from the western hill as it goes down to the gate area. Basically, the threshold of the gate here and our surfaces of the 10th century, there's at least 3 meters in height here. And so you can see the builders, when they came, this was the weak part of the tell. They inserted the gate system inside the low point, and we agree with David Shishkin on the built-tell podium type method at Lachish and a lot of these gate systems. It was placed here in the center, and then the wall built up as it went up to the western hill and eventually around the site here. And so it's one of the unique features of Gezer. Naturally, the big question is who destroyed this? This is a massive destruction. Every room had these toppled over building stones, ashlars, but yet when we removed it, we had no finds. So they're aware of whoever came, and HEC postulated that this destruction was by Shishak, and we agree with them. We don't think there's any reason that It fits stratigraphically, and on the way to Jerusalem, you have to come through Gezer. So this is probably a site that was conquered. Whoever owned this palace, whether it was a local governor or an agent of the king, knew that Shishak was coming, the Egyptians were coming. They cleared out the artifacts, and we just have the destruction by Shishak. I was reading an article the other day on how to define a destruction level, and they said you have to have destroyed pottery. I'll postulate that sometimes they don't, that the people actually remove their pottery, and what you have to need is a destruction. Here you can see a massive destruction. Immediately on top of this destruction, they were still aware because in Stratum 7, they reused some of the administrative building and part of the wall lines. But all of a sudden, we have a new city that's developed. It's all domestic units. You can see 5 units that we have defined in the archaeological record. Each of these units has domestic type pottery, and fortunately for us, this one was spared because of a tripartite building built on top of it. And we have a picture of a typical 9th century or Stratum 7 domestic building. And just to show you our stratigraphy, here you can see our Stratum 7, our Stratum 6 built on top of it. Here you can see our Stratum 6 built on top of our Stratum 7 cobbles. And the Stratum 7 in turn is built on top of the destroyed Shishak destruction of our Stratum 8. So Gezer has some nice stratigraphy. This one pillared building had destruction, storage jars. The entrance, you can see steps going south, storage jars, destruction. 3 central rooms also have destruction. This is one of my favorite slides here. You can see how well we excavate. 2011 season, nice clean excavations, good old American system. We take down the bulk and we find destruction. And fortunately, we had an 8th century pillared building that we didn't move because it was too big. And when that was removed, we found destruction in our room 5. So we have this nice, at least in our central room here, destruction and destruction that was excavated. Now, granted, the density, the destruction was built up against the wall here, and we're just fortunate that our line of our pillared building sealed this, and it kept it from McAllister collecting this pottery. So we have this one destruction here. Typical domestic type components, taboon, a unique installation. If anybody has an idea, we'll entertain any thoughts. Over in room 5, we have the circular installation. Beneath the surface level dug in, we have the continuation of the surface. This is above our Stratum 8, so it's still somewhere sub 9th century in this room 5 and going into room 4. And again, all these rooms had major destruction. We leave the pillared room, the central rooms, and the back rooms. We have our most destruction, and again, one of the unique finds is we have another game. This isn't as nice as the ivory game board, but it's just carved in simple chalk. And here we have the reconstruction of it. And we know that Gezer had some of these game boards, so naturally I went to the Rockefeller Museum at one of the events, and right there sitting in the Rockefeller Museum is a game board from Gezer. And so now we know that at least at Gezer, they played a lot of games. They still had this one Senate game that continued. A poorer quality is carved out of chalk. But again, several other finds with this 9th century destruction. This is currently what we're working on. We have it spread on our table. It's right now being restored. But as it's coming out, we're adding it to our collection here. But just basically looking at the pottery, you can tell this is a basic domestic assemblage of the 9th century. These are 9th century, this is 9th century domestic units. And one of the unique features is in the destruction, we found a dead dog. It was laying over a taboon. You know, our osteologist said it was planned. This dog was laying there purposefully. We joked that after the destruction, you have dogs that were going around the destruction. One died and just fell where it was looking at the taboo. So we just call it the dead dog here at the entrance to this one building. This past season, we found another dead dog, but this one was articulated. And so we knew for sure that this was a dog burial. So now in our 9th century, we have 2 dead dogs purposefully laying there. So we're not sure of this. I think this is the earliest dog burials we have in the southern Levant, and I'll gladly be corrected, but we're not sure of any other dog burials. At Leora, hopefully she's listening here. She can pipe in. She excavated this. But this was destroyed. Changed from public to private. We had our administrative building, public buildings. All of a sudden, this whole neighborhood, this area becomes domestic. It is not the typical Israelite 4-room house. So are these not Israelites? Are these not Israelites? Judites? Who's living here? Local Canaanite population. We're still trying to answer that question. We proposed that it was destroyed by Hazael, and it's a destruction. We know that Tal Safi has a Hazael destruction. To get to Tal Safi, you have to get through Gezer. So Sam and I just presented this at the Hazael workshop down in Bar Ilan last month, and there's archaeologists are starting to look at these 9th century destructions and trying to put them in within a historical context, and particularly with the Arameans. And so we think Gezer's possibly also part of this Aramean expansion in this region. But on top of this destruction, we have an 8th century occupation. This occupation again shifts. It's no longer domestic. These are public buildings. Most of them have been chewed away by McAllister, so all we have is the plan. Typical tripartite building, you could recognize cobble surfaces with olive oil installations. And all of a sudden, there's no longer domestic, but the domestic quarter gets shoved to the northwest. And we have our typical Israelite 4-room house now. So somewhere in the 9th century, they were building houses in a different tradition. And then in the 8th century, we come back to the Israelite tradition. We have our 4-room house. This is a massive building. Now, Field 7 also excavated 4-room houses. We're familiar with the Gezer 4-room house, but these were tiny. Well, I mean, they're typical. I shouldn't say tiny. They're 70 meters square. Ours is 132 meters square. We jokingly call this the governor's house, the Big Mama house, whoever you want to say was living there. But this is typical of Tel Gezer. This has the Assyrian destruction. I currently have a student, Charles Wilson, who's working in our lab now, who's doing his thesis on the distribution of ceramics. So I thank him that most of these slides are hopefully going to be his thesis. But you can see typical coastal forms, northern forms, the Israelite lamelic store jar. There's flavor that shows where Gezer is sitting on the border, crossroads of all these cultures. And here you can see our pretty slide to show you our 8th century destruction. Typical house here, and I'm just showing you over 1.5 meters. Nobody debates that this is the Tiglath-Pileser destruction mentioned in his capital, and actually all the scarab seals either being processed by Baruch Brando. He doesn't want me to show them longer than 3 seconds, so nobody publishes them. So I'll quickly go through them. Abulai, I like this. It's the typical calf with the calf suckling the mother. You can see the horns. And then zoomorphic vessels, loom weights, everything from a typical domestic assemblage, and hopefully at the end of this semester, my student will have his thesis, and this will all be published. Just to summarize it, we see the 8th century was a zenith, a major shift. We have fortifications, an administrative quarter, and the domestic quarter. And you can see where I'm getting at here. These are just later stuff for people interested in the later periods. Not that I'm not, but I had to cut out this lecture here, but just to let you know that we do have the Persian Hellenistic dog burials, coins, Hellenistic strata, basically the Maccabean period here. In summary, pulling this all together, Canaanite patrician house, 14th century. This summer, we hope to expand this large area here and get the complete plan of this house. On top of this 14th century, we have Iron Age 1, 12th century to 10th century. We have a whole complex of Iron Age buildings, a new city wall that was built. This is destroyed. And on top of that, we have a new administrative district built on top of the four-room house. You can see the administrative building. And then that is destroyed by Shishak. And then on top of that, we have domestic buildings. This is destroyed. These domestic buildings, again, a shift, it comes back. Now we have a major administrative center with tripartite buildings. The domestic quarter is moved up the western hill. And then that's destroyed by Tiglath-Pileser. And then we have auxiliary phases of the post 7th century all the way to the Persian period, and then a large Hellenistic complex and buildings built on top. Everybody asked, how are you dating everything? Is it based on the Bible or Assyrian and Egyptian texts? We do have C14 dates. They're actually nice. If you look at our Hazael destruction, they're from the 9th century. Shishak destruction, 10th century. This ephemeral phase, our Iron Age 1. So we have a nice window. We currently have our Stratum 11, C14 dates in Australia in a lab. And so we'll see how those dates look. And this summer, hopefully we'll excavate our late Bronze Age. We'll get data for our late Bronze Age. And if that's the typical Amarna period, we should see this graph here. Based on the sampling we've done so far, we have a nice picture. So it looks like we have some clean samples. We have nice destruction layers. We didn't sample our 8th century just because we have Tiglath-Pileser. Nobody, addresses it, but we'll probably send samples in just because we'll have a nice picture if we have the funds from the 8th century all the way to the late Bronze Age. We are part of this, hopefully getting involved with this larger C14 database here in the land. And you can see Gezer has some nice graphs. I'm looking at Felix drooling on this, so this is just for you, Felix, there. But with our excavations, it's not just the analysis of little seeds, but it's moving these large stones. And so Sam and I want to always acknowledge those students and volunteers and staff that come and do the hard work. And now as I'm the annual professor here and I have sabbatical and research time, hopefully all this will start to get published and analyzed as our pottery is being restored right now. And this last year will be our 10th season. And as is tradition, HUC went for 10 seasons. Sam and I will also end at 10 seasons. But also because we've hit our research goal. Once we get the late Bronze Age, we have a nice picture, and we'll go from the LB to the Iron Age 2 and have a nice picture of hopefully how Gezer has shifted and expanded to the political dynamics and the cultural dynamics going on here in the Shrey Law. And so with that, I want to invite you all to join us this summer. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Joe.
That foot with the 6 toes, I just wanted to say that I looked at quite a large number of skeletons. I worked issue that developed in that region. I found a skeleton 6-toed, and the person was not too tall, but it's something which is genetic. And
Yeah.
it's really the only time I have been hard. The only time I ever found a person who has 6 toes. As far as the dogs, the earliest dog burial was back in the Tufian period. You go up near Kiryat Shmoni in the Tufian period. Dog.
Yeah. Thank you.
Clear.
Yeah.
What happened to, there was a large number of skeletons which were excavated there, probably by McAllister. Whatever happened to that? No.
No.
Several hundred crania in one tomb.
We have all that, the tomb stuff from McAllister that, we assume it's in Istanbul, but I seriously doubt if the skeletons were analyzed or remained. Matt, yeah.
So you're finishing up Gezer. What's next?
Good question. For me, it's Kazakhstan. We have a new project in Kazakhstan, and I'm helping the Tandy do that. But for the Tandy project, we need several projects for our students to be involved with. And so right now, negotiating with other projects to see if we can coordinate with them and work with them. We're looking at sites in the Shrela, since the Tandy was involved with Timna in the early years of the Tandy, and now we have Gezer, but we'll go to the highest bidder. Myself, Sam and I will focus on the publications of Gezer, and so that'll be the main component. But we'll still need some Tandy projects for this. Hopefully, after our publication, who knows? Maybe one of my students will go back when I retire with the Tandy and correct what Sam and I did, and
Make fun of you.
Make fun of you and change what we've done. Yes. I think Sai wants to go back to Gezer. I've heard him talking about. Yes, Yes.
Sorry, you mentioned some skeletons, 200. I believe human. I suppose human stuff. And you mentioned a few dog burials. Is there any reason why? Are there any other skeletons, other animals, or just humans and dogs have been discovered?
Oh no, our osteologist, our bones. We have several species from, but not in terms of entombment that are buried. We have the phenomenon of dog burials.
Is there any explanation? Is there any explanation for that?
Humans, because they, yes. And we had a great presentation last month by Melissa, who's working with Megiddo burials and addressing some of the concepts of afterlife and post-inhumation, what they're doing. At Gezer, we have several tombs around the site, over 200, from the Middle Bronze Age or Early Bronze Age all the way to the Byzantine period. And what Josias was talking about is all these tombs that McAllister dug. We just don't have, they didn't collect the bones like that. And so that's one phase. On the site itself, we just have one late Bronze Age burial. And that's by HEC, and that's well published by Joe Sager and Gezer 5. Adam.
Beverly Lingering would like to ask, once you finish this upcoming season, will the Tel be closed down and created? Are no future projects scheduled at this time?
We will still have the survey project. So the survey still has about 2 or 3 years to go to finish. So Eric Mitch will continue with the survey project. Probably half of our Tandy students will just go over there and help them finish that project. You still have the New Orleans and the National Parks Authority project on the water system in the Middle Bronze Age. And they say they have 2 or 3 years left to go. And then I'm sure the National Parks Authority will start to process the site. We've already conserved the large administrative building. So we had a conservation team do that. This summer, I should have pointed this out when I showed the 4-room house. We are going to have a small 1-week season at Pesach just to excavate 1 more meter so we have the complete 4-room house. That will be restored. So I think most of the projects will be National Parks projects to prepare it. But yeah, it's open. Somebody else can go get a license and go to Gezer and deal with McAllister. Yes.
The Iron Age 1 walls for the later general period.
Yes.
Did you have any like insights into the general period? Who might have been there? What would cause that destruction?
They reused a wall of the Iron Age 1 period. So it would have been people after that, the Siamon destruction, that whole complex that was destroyed. But it was just a domestic structure. This one person was there. And then there's our Stratum 8. You have a brand new city planner that just bulldozed that house, built the new fortification system, and kind of gave it a whole new city plan. And so we just found it. We have no, just sherds associated with it. But we do have a stratum. And HUC has that stratum. So I'm sure elsewhere on the site we have this. After the site was destroyed, some houses here and there, but no major city or complex that we can talk about. Yes.
You mentioned the pillared room. You hinted at it being cultic in some respects. So did I hear that right?
Yes.
Was there more? It seemed to correspond to the pottery ware that you found. Was there more there that indicated sort of cultic usage? Figurines.
That's it. It's the figurines, the 6-toed figurine that we talked about. There's no evidence of domestic type architecture. We do have domestic buildings up on the Acropolis, but it's a unique pillared building. It could be a hangout that they came down on the slope and yes.
Great, thank you, Steve.
Sure.
Want to thank you all for coming in, and thank you all at home for watching. And for those of you who will be watching in the future, thank you. For those of you who want to keep up with our progress here at the Albright, our various fundraising and renovation campaigns, and with our programming, please check out our Facebook page and our website where you can sign up for our regular notices. Great, thanks again. Bye. I feel inclined.